Hello, I'm Avis Kaufsbeck, and this is the Peace is Here podcast. Welcome to Peacewarts, School of Peacecraft and Inquiry, where we practice the skills of peace through short classes. We take the peace work seriously, but not ourselves. If you're joining us mid-school year, you're not late. Orientation begins at episode 198. Welcome back to Peacewarts, Peace Scholars. We are in Resonant Charms 101 in the Echo Chamber. In our last lesson, we learned to look behind the mask for the human ask. Today, we examine the mental gravity of the words we choose. We are studying the weight of metaphor, how the language of war in medicine and politics shapes our violent outcomes. The 20th century linguist George Lakoff once observed, "The metaphors we live by are not just matters of language, they actually govern our thoughts and our actions." The entry, the policy engine. In the department of resonant charms, a metaphor is not just a poetic decoration, it is a policy engine. When we describe a social or medical challenge as a war, we are doing something powerful. We are rallying resources, signaling urgency, and calling for heroes. This can be incredibly effective for fundraising and public focus, but metaphors carry a hidden weight. If we are at war, then someone or something must be defeated. A peace scholar audits their language to ensure that our rally cries don't accidentally normalize aggression or leave the vulnerable feeling like failed soldiers. The history, the war on cancer and the hero's burden. To understand the balance, we look to the 1971 National Cancer Act. This metaphor successfully moved billions of dollars into research and unified the public in a way few things have. It was a noble effort to conquer a devastating thief of life. However, looking back with 50 years of data, we see the side effects of this martial language. In a 2014 study published in the journal Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin, researchers found that battle metaphors actually made people less likely to engage in preventative behaviors. When we frame healing as a battle, we unintentionally frame the patient as a soldier. If the treatment doesn't work, the language of war suggests the patient lost their fight or gave up. It can increase guilt and even reduce the use of palliative care because surrender is seen as a tactical failure rather than a natural transition. We can honor the massive progress made by this movement while recognizing that a body is not a battlefield, it is an ecosystem. The thesis. From combat to cultivation. The lesson for today is that when we use war metaphors to describe our neighbors or our health, we normalize the architecture of war. Other disciplines of the weight of metaphor include the hero trap. During the COVID-19 pandemic, calling nurses frontline heroes was a rally cry, but many nurses felt it was a way to bypass safety concerns. In 2020, various nursing unions pointed out that being called a hero was often used to justify the lack of adequate personal protective equipment and the normalization of systemic exhaustion. It shifted the responsibility from systemic reform to individual bravery, implying that if you were tired, you simply weren't being heroic enough. The clinical pivot. Scholars like Elena Zemino at Lancaster University have analyzed thousands of patient stories, finding a move toward ecology metaphors, gardening the body, seeking balance, and repairing the soil. This allows for a committed struggle for health, similar to a gardener working against a drought without the shame of defeat if the outcome isn't a total cure. It reclaims the patient's agency as a caretaker rather than a combatant. Politics as stewardship. Instead of winning a knockout debate, we look to the town hall language of stewardship. In the 1990s, political scientists noted that metaphors of building a house or caretaking a village encouraged more bipartisan compromise than the sports metaphors of scoring points or crushing the opposition. One is a zero-sum game with a loser. The other is a service with a community. The 1990s Portuguese shift. In 2001, Portugal decriminalized personal drug use and shifted its national metaphor from a war on drugs to a health pathway. By treating drug use as a public health issue rather than a criminal combat zone, they focused on treatment and recovery instead of policing and incarceration. The result was a dramatic drop in overdose rates and HIV transmission, proving that changing the noun changes the outcome. The Metaphor Replacement Lab, Micropractice. There is a simple translation that changes the internal frequency. For example, instead of fighting inflation, one might use cooling the household budget, which replaces the image of a physical enemy with the image of a temperature to be managed. Similarly, replacing battling addiction with accompanying a recovery shifts the stance from an internal war to a supportive journey. The Commons Forge. How does this concept of the weight of metaphor support a world of sharing? It reminds us that our conceptual frameworks establish the ground rules for how we distribute collective assets. When we describe social, medical, or economic hurdles using the adversarial language of warfare, we instinctively default to an enforcement mindset that prioritizes centralization, zero-sum rationing, and the policing of boundaries. By intentionally substituting combat framing with the language of stewardship and ecology, a peace scholar keeps our collaborative networks open, ensuring that communities can allocate resources based on long-term health, mutual care, and sustainable shared preservation. Homework. 1. Look up the research on militarized metaphors in healthcare and find one alternative metaphor, like journey or gardening, that doctors are using to improve patient well-being. 2. Write down one question about any of this episode's topics. If you don't have a question, just write "no question." 3. Optional. Journal about a war you are currently fighting in your personal life. What happens to your stress if you reframe that war as a navigation or a renovation? If you'd like to read more on this subject, some book suggestions are Metaphors We Live By George Lakoff and Mark Johnson, a foundational linguistic masterpiece that reveals how our everyday conceptual frameworks unconsciously dictate human thought and behavior, and Illness as Metaphor by Susan Sontag, a brilliant and searing critique that exposes how militarized punitive language inflicts deep psychological harm on patients navigating complex health conditions. These are also in the show notes with the homework. The clear signal. A clear signal is a creative signal. We can be fiercely committed to healing and justice without adopting the vocabulary of the sword. If you can change the metaphor, you can change the outcome. Until our next lesson, keep your heart in the harmonic. Class dismissed. Thank you for listening. If you're looking for your next read, I write books about strong friends, wild places, and a future worth the effort. The Pater the Water Dog Saves the Planet series follows two best friends, Tilly and Camus, strong, funny, and in love with the wild world, who decide their small choices add up to something. Hopeful eco-fiction for grown-ups, climate fiction without the doom. You can jump in anywhere or start with book 1. In one more year, Tilly can swim like a dolphin and run like the wind. She just never learned to cycle, which is a problem because she's decided to attempt her first Ironman. Her reason isn't glory. It's a quiet, stubborn idea. If one ordinary person can finish something this hard, Maybe a whole town can be talked into buying less, wasting less, and keeping their stuff longer. 1 more year. To pull it off, Tilly leans on her best friend and coach Camus, tattooed, tequila-loving, and exactly the voice you'd want yelling at you from the shore, plus a gruff retired cycling pro hiding out on a private island, a pack of maverick mountain bikers, a salty old pirate named Ike, and Pedro, her devoted water dog. Together they train, scheme, fall a little in love, and slowly realize their northwest lake town of Sandglass is facing a threat bigger than any race. My books are available wherever books are sold, including at avaskolfsbeck.com. Podcast music is by Javier Pequi Rodriguez, and the track is I Am Late, Madame Curie. Sound effects are from Pixabay. Regarding peace, we need not delay or despair. We are not late. We are right on time to love. We are all scholars of peace. Listen for the peace.